Following information is taken from the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory from the U.S. Department of Commerce. You can see the link here, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration.gov. On the afternoon of October 13th, 1947, an Air Force B-17 aircraft penetrated a hurricane 415 miles east of Jacksonville and dumped several pounds of crushed dry ice into the storm, just to see what would happen. You gotta love the verbiage there. This was the first attempt to modify a tropical cyclone by seeding it with freezing nuclei. It was almost the last. The previous year, Vincent Schaefer, working at General Electric GE Laboratories, discovered that by introducing dry ice, solid carbon dioxide, into an environment with supercooled water that was colder than 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, but had not yet frozen, he could induce the water to freeze into ice. He realized that this could be done in the free atmosphere and could spur microphysical reactions that would alter clouds and precipitation. At his urging, GE Labs reached an agreement with the Naval Research Laboratory and Army Signal Corps, dubbed Project Cirrus, to carry out experiments where Air Force aircraft would seed clouds in fog with dry ice to see what changes occurred. It wasn't long before plans were made to try a seeding experiment in a hurricane. However, it wasn't until late in the following hurricane season that Air Force planes and Navy personnel became available to carry out the mission. On October 12th, a hurricane, designated King by the Air Force Hurricane Office, moved northeastward over Florida, dumping tropical downpours on the southern end, which caused damaging flooding that persisted for days. The next day, the storm moved off the coast and continued out to sea. This seemed an ideal case for Project Cirrus, as the hurricane was no longer interacting with land and should not affect anyone after the experiment. That afternoon, 2 B-17s and a B-29 left Mobile, Alabama, and flew eastward, or is that Alaska? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the AL, and flew eastward to intercept the hurricane. The first bomber flew at cloud top level and did the seeding. Large chunks of dry ice were fed into a crusher on the plane and dumped from the belly into the clouds below. The second B-17 followed a half-mile behind and 3,000 feet, 900 meters above to document the cloud changes. The trailing B-26 was to control aircraft and carried Schaefer to monitor the changes and direct the other two planes. The aircraft lacked sophisticated homing gear, so it was decided not to penetrate the eye or heavy rain bands of the hurricane, but seed the outer clouds. They first made a half-hour run, over 100 miles long, dumping 80 pounds of ice along the way. They backtracked then to see what the clouds had done. Next, they did 2 mass droppings of 50 pounds each into one large cumulus top and orbited the cloud to see any changes. They noticed that after the first run, the cloud deck below began to break up. After the second test, the cloud top continued to grow. Satisfied with their effort, the airplanes returned to base. The scientists were eager to examine the storm the following day. However, when they flew to the predicted storm location, they had trouble locating the eye. After some hunting around, they found the hurricane center nearly 100 miles west of where it was expected to be. To their astonishment, the hurricane had made a 135-degree left turn and was now moving due west. On top of that, it was strengthening. By the afternoon of the 15th, Hurricane King struck Savannah, Georgia. 1 person died in the storm surge, and $2 million in damage was done to Georgia and South Carolina. The public was outraged that the scientists had caused the storm to swerve into Georgia. Okay, one more time. I know you can see it up here, but www.Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration.gov. .gov, as in government-sponsored website. The public was outraged that the scientists had caused the hurricane to swerve into Georgia, and threats of lawsuits were thrown about. GE's case was not helped when the head of its laboratories, Dr. Irving Langmuir, issued a statement that he was 99% sure that the storm had changed course due to the seeding. Chief of the Weather Bureau, Dr. Francis Richel-Durfer, thought differently and appointed 3 of his weathermen to find a case where a hurricane had followed a similar track but had not been seeded. The case was published, demonstrating that hurricanes could swerve like that without the use of dry ice, and the threats of lawsuits eventually evaporated. But the public's early enthusiasm for weather modification slackened. Well, maybe that's because you literally sent a hurricane flying into Georgia. Right? Maybe that's a good sign that cloud seeding should probably be off limits when you literally power up a fucking hurricane and send it into Georgia.